The crux of entrepreneurship, you better know sales. One of my mentors in college, he said, go into sales. It's transferable across any industry. It's recession proof. It's inflation proof. You're going to be in the right place, right time. One, trust the unrest. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to where you feel resentment. Get yourself into integrity with what's true for you. Number two, decide to cut off taking things out you know are a no for you and deciding definitively to say no to them, and that opens up possibilities. If we all look at where we're at today, we can reverse engineer and start to see it just was like breadcrumbs. We followed one thing, we went to one thing, we went to another, we met this person. And so it's the same thing of just honoring that journey. Would I be okay if this were the last year of my life if I did not do that thing? And sometimes that helped me prioritize of like, not that important, or yes, very important, and making those a priority.
Good day, everyone. This is Dr. David Phelps of the Freedom Founders Mastermind Community and the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. Today, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with a longtime friend, somebody I've known in the business, but also as a mentor, colleague, somebody who really helps a lot of people in their businesses with a key aspect, which many of us have trouble with, and that is actually just helping people discover what we do well in service or products. And that is really the key element of sales. And so I have today Vanessa Horn with me. Vanessa, how are you doing?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, my pleasure as well. Just a little bit more background about Vanessa. She's the CEO of Vanessa Horn International and the founder of the Classy Close and the Signature Sales Agency. Vanessa has an MBA and over the last 18 years has built top sales organizations and has taught her Classy Close sales system to over 60,000 entrepreneurs to help them master enrolling high-end clients online. She's been featured on national television, radio, and magazines for her work, and she and her husband of 24 years and their 3 sons currently live in North Carolina. To learn more about her sales training programs and done-for-you sales agency, you can visit vanessahorn.com and theclassyclose.com. So first, I want to find out a little bit more about how did you find your way into sales? What was it about your innate gifts, your abilities that kind of moved you that direction? Was it quick and easy, and did you just funnel your way, or did you go through some iterations of yourself as you were going into adulthood and getting your degrees? How did that happen, Vanessa?
Well, I wholly embraced entrepreneurship and somehow rejected sales. All at the same time, until I got far enough along in my entrepreneurial journey to realize, like, the crux of entrepreneurship, you better know sales.
Right.
As a matter of fact, one of my mentors in college, when I approached him, what should I go into? What would you recommend career-wise? He said, go into sales. It's transferable across any industry. It's recession proof. It's inflation proof. You're going to be in the right place, right time. And I was like, ooh, nah, I just had this impression in my head about what sales was. And it wasn't until years later that I had my first son and I started my own entrepreneurship journey, and I bought a franchise. And part of that franchise was a $35,000 investment. And I swear the best thing I got out of that was sales training. And I saw this woman, as a matter of fact, in your backyard in Texas, because it was a Curves franchise. And I saw this Texan woman get on stage and train sales and how to proactively overcome objections. And she did it in such an elegant and non-pushy way. I was like, oh my God, that I can do that. And so I taught my organization at Curves how to do that. And we became the #1 Curves franchise in the nation out of 10,000 for how quickly we were growing. And then I ended up selling that and going into the network marketing industry. I kind of took that same framework, built a script for how to enroll people, became the #1 distributor in a company. And then when I went into being a coach and teaching people online, I was trying to teach all the things: how to create your service packages, how to market online and get leads, and how to enroll. But as time went on, I narrowed it down to just the sales bit of it, because that's the part I loved most. And I also could see the thread line of the businesses that we had built and sold. It was because we did sales well. And as you know, if you're going to distinguish yourself in a business, pick what is your zone of genius. That's just what's your zone of excellence. And so we went all in on sales and just have created a process and a methodology that most people tell me, Vanessa, oh my God, you make sales feel easy. fun, take away the ick, really honoring the prospect. And that's what I love, is creating those transformational experiences for entrepreneurs. And also, I want to make the world a better place, and selling experiences to not be what has been our typical impression of them, what turned me off to sales in the first place.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. Is I think you had the same initial reaction to someone, to your mentor, who said, go into sales, or you need to do sales. It's like, typically people do turn away from that because our experiences, or I should say our poor experiences with sales, as it is what turns us all off. And there's plenty of that out there, right? And so I think a lot of us think, with high integrity, high value services, products, businesses that do provide real value to people, we don't want to think that we need to really, quote, sell. We just want to just kind of build it and they will come type of attitude.
Yes.
But it'd be great if that would happen, but you have to be able to, engage with a prospective customer, client, a patient in such a way that it's non-manipulative. It's that there is ethics behind it, and you're, really trying to engage someone who could be a right client for you. Anyway, we could spend hours on that, because that's your forte, and I don't want to go too down that rabbit hole, because I know I'll get you pumped up and going there. We can come back and do that. That may be fun for a second follow-up episode. I want to take some of the lessons that you have learned and you've recently posted online, and I thought, just knowing who you are resonated with me. It's sometimes the painful lessons that we learn as entrepreneurs and go through, and some of the things we tend to think we need to hide inside, because, well, you just have to buck up, and this is just the way you do it around here. And so you started talking about 10 years ago, and this is after you've gone, I think, and gone through your Curves franchise, and you were in the network marketing, and you were at the top of the stack there. I mean, you had really mastered it, obviously, the art of sales, but also with great business value behind it. And you just came to some reflections. I think you said, if I remember, you said something about to embrace some of the uneasiness and restlessness that you might have. I think we've all had that in our lives, maybe more than once. You want to go back and talk a little bit about what you started to go through some 10 years ago?
Yeah. So the reason why I started these 10 years of lessons is just because that's when I came into the coaching industry and education industry, and on my own versus representing other businesses like in network marketing. And the reason why I said that, to embrace the unrest, that was one of the lessons. And something that people really resonated with is this: when you have resentment, it's actually a gift, because it shows you where you're out of integrity with yourself. And so therefore, if you're in a situation where you're just feeling an agitation, you're just feeling like unrest, something's not right. And I have experienced this multiple times in my entrepreneurial journey. And sometimes it's really scary to consider making a shift whenever everybody looks at, you've built something successful, and why would you change that? Maybe in your audience, why would you sell your practice? Or why would you want to go into real estate, or other things that might be shifts for your audience? It's paying attention to where that's coming up and honoring that. And it's really my muscle for courage, my muscle for believing everything is figure outable, and I can shift and make adjustments, has strengthened as a result of honoring. And so now I just pay attention. It may have taken me, maybe I was in unrest for 2 years, and now I've gotten in situations where I can pivot and I can make a shift of unrest within days. And so it's not like sometimes in the moment we can beat ourselves up and say, like, how come in the moment I didn't catch that? But if we just pay attention, okay, it took me 2 years to pivot or to honor that unrest in me previously, but now it's shortening my time frame, whether it's hiring bad people and you're like, oh, I don't know, should I let them go? And you tolerate things for lesser time frames before you just start to trust those unrests that may come up in your journey. So that's what that was, because I had to trust the unrest of leaving the network marketing industry, something that was bringing me in residual income. And yet I could see that there were things from a leadership perspective that weren't right. And I was debating, do I go and launch my own thing? And when I did, the magic of what unfolded, finding the buyer for my business and launching and finding the right mentors, all those things took place because of the power of decision. And that was lesson number 2. It's like, 1, trust the unrest, pay attention to that, pay attention to where you feel resentment, get yourself into integrity with what's true for you. Number 2, decide. And the word decide means to cut off. That means like taking things that you know are a no for you and deciding definitively to say no to them. And that opens up possibilities. It opens up. And there's this distinction I make on a scale of 1 to 10. As entrepreneurs, as capable, as talented individuals, we can do a lot of things well. And maybe we tolerate things that are like an 8 out of 10. But the enemies of the 10s in our lives are going to be the 8s, the 9s, even the 9.9s. And so if we just pay attention to where we might be settling, and maybe it's just a little bit of a settle, and instead say, you know what, I'm going to say no to that. I'm going to decide against that. It creates an openness where the 10s can show up in your life. You can make the business decisions that are more aligned and are those 10s.
That's so good, Vanessa. You know, I deal with a lot of professional practice owners, a lot of dentists, and many of them, you know, get kind of stuck in a certain rut, you know, in their life, their practice. Some maybe are working for a corporate dental clinic because they're younger and out of school and they haven't developed the capital base to go start their own practice. And many of them are in clinic situations where there isn't always, I'm generalizing, but not always a lot of the integrity. It's kind of based on numbers, and they don't feel good about that. And so they feel that ick feeling, that resentment. It's like, I need to be here because I need to pay my student loan bills and my debt, but it doesn't feel good. It's not what I signed up for. And I think the fear of whatever it is that we have built in trading time for dollars at whatever scale, whatever level, the fear is if we go to make that pivot or that shift, is we're going to fall off a cliff, and like it's going to be all over, and we'll never get back out again. I can speak just as you can about that. That's not true. It is scary. It's like looking over that cliff and saying, you know, is there something that's going to catch me? How's that going to happen? You know, am I just going to plummet to the bottom and never rise up again? But you said a key thing is that when you make that decision, then that starts to open up the possibilities. Until we make that decision, the possibilities, we have no creative juice in us. We can't even go beyond where we are today. And the first pivots are usually when we realize what we need to do and make that decision. Those first pivots can be sometimes the most formidable, right? The first one, big change from going from network marketing, where you had substantial residual income coming in, and you could have ridden that on. You could have stayed there and continued to have that income, but inside you would be fighting that inner conflict the whole time. And you just made the decision, I can't do that. So you flip the switch and you start your own coaching business, and that just started to embrace a whole lot of new possibilities. Go through a little. What are some of the dynamics that you had to face, maybe at home with maybe your husband, maybe with, again, colleagues that were in the network business with you who looked up to you, and you're making the shift? I mean, how did you mentally fend that off, or any kind of the questions? You know, how could you, Vanessa? How could you give that up? You know, what did you do with that?
Well, it's acknowledging when you have been tied to the golden handcuffs. When I left corporate to become an entrepreneur for the first time, I had to leave the golden handcuffs of that steady paycheck, air quotes. When I left the network marketing industry, I had to give up this residual income. And the main reason why I left is because, and I think the clearer we get on our values, the easier it is to make those decisions. But for me, I have zero tolerance for leadership that has lack of integrity, or something that is causing, because sometimes we think, oh, I'm getting a paycheck, but meanwhile, there's an energetic cost because we're in turmoil, we're in stress, we're in discontent. And so therefore, I just refuse. Like, who I have in my life is such a huge value. And this is why Warren Buffett only invests in companies where he believes in the leadership of that organization. So if any of your listeners are in a situation when they're thinking, well, I'm here for this paycheck, but I don't jive with the leadership, This doesn't feel good. I just want you to open up your mind to asking the question, how can I? If it's, I want to launch a new business or I want to go out on my own, instead of the brain where it starts to collect evidence of all the ways it could go wrong, start to open up your brain to the possibility of how can I? I have just so many times in my life have turned down opportunities because I assumed I couldn't afford them. It was too different. Like I even had somebody who approached me one time and said, would you want to be our US representative for this franchise in the US? It's $1 million. At the time, I didn't have $1 million, but rather than just shutting it down entirely, I said, well, let's have a conversation. Because now I've like grown in my muscle of, okay, if I really wanted something, I'll find that $1 million. But while they didn't ever expand to the US with their franchise, that person, they ended up becoming a client of mine. So it's like, you just go down the path, don't shut doors because you say, I can't afford it, or I can't do that. Just start to open up possibilities of how can I, what would that look like? Let me start exploring. Can I find a mentor who's done what I've done? And let me look at their business model. What are the questions? Let me make sure I have a full view of what the business model looks like and what decisions, what I need to have in place, rather than staying on the precipice of, that's too scary. I don't know, just start taking the steps, and it just makes it easier when we finally do make that transition.
Yeah, you talked about in your posting, about how important it is to get clear about what we want, having that vision, getting that clarity. And sometimes we need those other people around us. We need that circle of advisors, people that believe in us, the mentor that can help us to help pull that out. Because again, sometimes we'll stay in our kind of like our shutdown mode, and this is just what it is. So getting clear first thing, then just deciding to, as you say, follow the breadcrumbs. Talk about following the breadcrumbs. Give some examples of following the breadcrumbs that you talked about in your post.
As an example, my sister has a heart of gold. She wanted to be a therapist. She wanted, because of our background, having extreme challenges with our mother who is abusive, she wanted to be a mother to the motherless. And she's a single mom herself. And when we started looking at her career, it was going to cost her at least $30,000 a year to get her therapy degree. And then whenever I broke down the math for her, I was like, look, what are your earning potentials going to be for that? Like, can you really sustain your family and your kids? You're going to earn probably $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And I just said, like, would you be open to learning sales? And she's like, Vanessa, I am not you. I cannot do sales, but I'm open to learning. And certainly if I can learn, then I'm a case study for your method working. And I said, we will use what you're good at as your superpower in sales. So we got really, really, really clear on what she needed, both to earn per hour, the amount of hours that she wanted to work. And for your listeners, it's getting clear. Sometimes getting clear means listing, what do you not want? Don't just look at what other people have created, but look at, like, that didn't feel good. I only want to work between X and X hours while my kids are in school. I don't want to have to work weekends. I don't want this. I want, like, just write down what you don't want. And sometimes that gives you clarity about what you do want. Or if you see something about other people's lives that you appreciate and that you value, then add that to your list. And so for her, we got really clear about, with her kids in school and as a single mom, what hours did she have to work and what did she really need to earn in order to be able to provide for her family. I taught her sales, and now I'm really happy that she's somebody who's now earning in a month what she would have earned in a year previously, like the path that she was on. And she's now able to do that work, that charity work, helping motherless girls as an overflow and not having to monetize that.
It's so good to help someone, particularly someone, in this case, your sister, who has those gifts and just got her over the fear factor of, it looks too difficult to do. I can't do this, and just having that clarity to make that
happen. And if we all look to your question of the following the breadcrumbs, if we all look at where we're at today, maybe even like, how do we get into the career that we're at, or how do we end up with the partner that we have? We can reverse engineer and start to see, it just was like breadcrumbs. We just went we followed one thing, we went to one thing, we went to another, we met this person. And so it's the same thing of just honoring that journey. And for me, what's been really helpful is if we can, especially when we're competent individuals, there's a statement that we have in our head, at least I do, where it serves me, but it also sometimes harms me. And it's this belief, if it's going to be, it's up to me. That has served me really well in my life because I'm pretty autonomous and a go-getter and want to make things happen. But where it has not served me is where I feel alone, where I feel like I'm an orphan, where I feel like, well, if I fail, then I'll end up homeless. Let's go to worst case scenario, right? If I fail in this endeavor. And when we trust that there's something bigger at play, then we can be more open to the breadcrumbs. Like, I don't know why this thing is showing up, but if I believe that all things work together for good, then I'm going to trust what this may be or where this is going. And so it allows us to be more open to those breadcrumbs and trust that whether something feels connected or not, when we have that clarity of what we're creating, we can trust that those baby steps, those crumbs will come along the way and we can take those steps. And it ultimately leads us to the clarity of and what we're trying to create as our next step.
Vanessa, you also spoke about being aware of your energy levels. And there was a time when you were asked to give 2 different talks at a conference. One talk was something more about the fundamentals, I think, of that particular business. And then I think a talk you did later in the day, maybe in the afternoon, was a talk about really what like kind of your next was. And somebody came up to you and engaged with you and enjoyed your talks, but made a comment that the talk that you did in the afternoon, your energy level was completely different. Do you want to talk about how we should be aware of energy levels? Because I think that speaks a lot to what makes us tick. And sometimes that's very revealing.
It totally is. When I've helped people put together, when I've coached people around their businesses and I ask them questions, I'll pay attention to their energy and the cadence in which they speak. Because when their energy goes up and their cadence speeds up, that's usually a clue that that's where the true energy is. And then the other thing that's usually the more comfortable thing, the thing that they're maybe have accepted as what others want for them, and maybe the more safe route. And I put air quotes on safe because I always feel like selling out our soul's never safe. That's usually an indication of like, yeah, you're holding on to that as a comfort, but your real energy is over here. What if you trusted yourself to pursue this thing? And sometimes it's not a either or. Sometimes it's an and, right? It doesn't mean that we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes there's a place where they can coexist. And so it's just being like paying attention to, okay, I come alive. My energy is higher. I could talk about this. I could I'm speaking with a faster cadence around this. Those are all clues of where your desires really are, and trust that. Sometimes I've just found people need permission. They just need to be given permission to, yes, pursue that thing. That sounds true for you. And I ultimately had to make some decisions in my journey where I was like, what if I never did this thing? Would I be okay? Would I be okay if this were the last year of my life, if I did not do that thing? And sometimes that helped me prioritize of like, not that important, or yes, very important, and making those a priority.
Talk to us a little bit about where gratitude fits into your whole pathway through your pivots and changes and iterations. Where does gratitude fit in?
Well, one of the stories that I shared in my 10 years of lessons was that there was a point in the journey when, and this is where us paying attention to where resentment is, or paying attention to what really lights us up and pursuing that instead, honoring our values, where I was in a situation in my business where I had overextended myself. And I was teaching people to create their programs, launch them online, sell. And because people didn't have a technical acumen, entrepreneurs in particular, I launched a whole marketing agency. You know what? Never mind. My team will build out the funnels. My team will run the ads. It sucked the life out of me. It was So it was not a move that I should have made, but I did make it. As a result, I depleted my energy, and I got to where I was so physically unwell and had adrenal fatigue and complete burnout that my business started to go down extremely fast. And I got to a place where I couldn't pay for the overhead of my team, because at that time the overhead was about $35,000 a month, and the income had gone from 60K months all the way down to just over 7,000. And I could not get myself out of bed. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I had to let go of team members that I loved, make changes in my business. And at the same time that this occurred, our landlord approached us and said, hey, I'm going to sell the house that you're in. And I did not pay him like 2 seconds of thought. I was like, nope, we're not interested. I do not have the energy to even think about this. And he had put it on the market several times before. And so I just assumed he's not going to sell it. We'll be fine. But then he immediately found a buyer, and we had to be out in 30 days. And I felt already energetically like I was running a marathon, or actually crawling it with my hands and knees. And that my landlord telling us that felt like he was asking me to stand up and run a 100-yard dash in the next 30 days. And I didn't know where I was going to get that energy. And that's where I started to, this is where the lesson of gratitude came in, because I was in complete protest to reality. I was upset. I was angry. And in that state, which I call protest to reality, stage 1, because my girlfriends and my husband were like, you're not doing well. Are you doing okay? What can we do to help? And I said, just leave me alone. I know myself well enough. I can predict what my stages will be. Number 1, this protest to reality, where I'm just basically being a victim to my circumstance. 2, I'll eventually probably move to disassociation from reality, just to pull myself up by my bootstraps and do what I need to survive. The 3rd stage is where I'll start to see, okay, so this is what we've been handed, but I get to make my decision and my reaction. So what I want to create with what has been dealt to me, the hand that's been dealt to me. And 4thly, I'll finally get to a state of gratitude in stage 4, and I'll look back and I'll see God's hand in all of it. And I'll be grateful for what occurred. Now, that whole journey could take years, but I read at the time, I was reading one of my clients' webinars, and she happened to talk about the power of gratitude. Now, my husband and I do prayers and gratitude with our kids every night. And it wasn't like I didn't practice gratitude, but sometimes we can just go through the motions and not really marinate in it or apply it to these situations. And when I read that, I realized I can't wait. It's not serving me to marinate in protests of reality, anger, grief, blaming my husband, blaming our landlord. And there's, your audience can go back and read this story. This has triggers to my childhood when we were in essence homeless and had to move into a church. And so it's all these triggers were coming back. But I realized that I had to make a conscious choice that I was going to get to stage 4 sooner. And so as a matter of fact, I wasn't sure how we would afford it, because during all this time, my credit score went down over 200 points into the 500s. And I started to see, okay, 1, rent has doubled in the market, and 2, it's going to be extraordinarily challenging to get a house, a loan for a house. And especially my income was down at this juncture. And I just said to my sons, no, let's just think about this. Wait, here's what our situation is. Let's find a house that we really want. And I was clear. I wanted a house that had all windows. I wanted 4, bedrooms for each of my kids. I wanted an office that wasn't an afterthought. I wanted a bathroom for each kid. I wanted them out of mine. And I just got clear on what this list was. And within days, I found a house on the market. And my son was like, Mom, why are you looking at that? We can't afford it. And this goes back to what we talked at the beginning of the podcast. I just said, honey, let's not say we can't afford it. Let's see, how can we afford it? Right. And we made an offer. We won the bid on the house. They accepted our offer. And I've discovered I had to come up with an extra 100,000 that I wasn't expecting. And I was able to create it because I was in stage 3 and 4. I was already in gratitude. I was already in hey, I am a creator, not a victim of my circumstance here. And so if anybody finds themselves in those earlier stages, recognize, I'm a big believer of like honoring yourself where you're at. Sometimes we just need to be honest and be like, okay, I'm not doing great today, but you have an opportunity to make a choice, a different choice later today, or even tomorrow, when we recognize that staying in that victim state is not really serving us. Our prefrontal cortex gets hijacked. We can't even see with clarity. We can't see opportunity because we're so fearful.
Well, Vanessa, such important lessons. I really appreciate you sharing those. I resonated very much. My story's different, but so many similarities, and I know a lot of people listening are connecting to what you're talking about today. So the appreciation for you being willing to, be authentic and just, expose the vulnerabilities that we all have, and sometimes we just don't want to share them because they're too personal. But then, how can you help people if you hold everything back? And you're an amazing person. I've just had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years, and just having you be willing to share this today was amazing for us and our audience. Give us a little bit of an idea how you work with companies, like what kind of companies, businesses, just so people have a little bit of an idea. Because again, we talked about earlier, sales, ethical sales is the way to build a business, and you've certainly proven that in your own life.
So I do teach the Classy Close, which is a course. It's primarily for people who sell services. And I also run, my primary focus is our Done For You agency, where I will recruit, train, place, and manage salespeople for organizations, typically in the coaching, consulting, or professional services industry, where they can do the remote sales and do the closing on the internet, on the Zoom, in essence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the primary focus of what we do.
Just to dive into a specific arena of healthcare today that maybe has some application. I'm just curious. So I've got to ask this, telemedicine or teledentistry. We went to Zoom a lot. So people are a lot more comfortable with Zoom today. How much of that are you seeing? Obviously, with what you do, a lot happening in that arena. Where I'm just thinking out loud here, but we have a patient come to the dental office. It could be man, woman, husband or wife. They come alone. They have a treatment plan, but now they have to go back and convey it to their spouse. Get there. Okay, spouse wasn't there, so there's some opportunities there. I'm just seeding this a little bit. Opportunities in that realm to have people that can connect in that way and use.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the offer that my sister is on is a healthcare offer. It's an offer where it's similar to like when I was in Curves, where we had to ask the question, how is your partner supportive of this? Are you guys on the same page about the goals, about what this would accomplish? And even myself, where I've invested in, I was increasing the more out of pocket payers, right? And that's exclusively how we've mostly been as a family. And there's been those instances where I've needed to invest in something that was substantial health wise. And my husband justified it. He's like, listen, we're taking these proactive measures to prevent needing to have extraordinary expenses down the road. And so just even that way of thinking about things, but it's making sure that the partners are on the same page around the goals, and then identifying, okay, are you guys on the same page about this objective that you want? And if you didn't do this, what would you do instead? When people realize like either their options are doing nothing, and is that acceptable, or your solution, or if they don't do your solution, if they're looking at other solutions, it's going to have them come face to face with what's usually uncomfortable, which is investing money or time. And so those would be some places where the opportunity exists for incorporating the partner conversation into it, or building that into a script, is finding out how is your partner supportive? Tell me how this fits into the bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish or the goals that you guys have. Why is this important to solve? And then if they push back, then, okay, well, if you don't do this, what would you do instead? Or just a couple of things I would say along those lines.
I think we're getting ready for part 2 of our next podcast interview. Stay tuned because I'm going to have Vanessa back, and we're going to go down that. I appreciate you so much. We will come back, and we'll do a session where we can go into some deep dives of your skill set, which can again be very applicable to my audience, my listeners. So Vanessa Horn, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, David.
If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.